Hey, this is Jose Galison of No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel. You can also find me just about everywhere podcasts are at. Today, my guest is Patrick MacFarlane. What we're doing today is I'm going to give you a little, explain to you what's going on. Back in the height of the coup, before I started podcast or anything, I wrote an article on a pretty long one about the monopoly on violence, kind of a review / breakdown type thing. And I was really excited with how it came out back then. And just me and Patrick were kind of talking about it at some point. We thought it'd be cool to break it down and do break into a few parts and do a few different episodes. I'm going to host one. He's going to host one. We'll figure out something for the last one. Hopefully I can do something special for y'all. And yeah, we're just going over it. I remember when I watched it, I fucking loved it. But yeah, like I said, I'm just going to be reading the article. We're going to be kind of talking in between and such. As always, I like money, so fucking hit me up at patreon.com. Just No Way Jose 2020. That was a rough fucking cutaway to that. You can give me crypto at endthefed.app. No Way Jose 2020 as well. All right, I'm gonna bring on Patrick. We'll fucking get to this. What's up, dude?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Good. All right, you ready to do this?
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Do it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start reading it. It'll be a decent little intro. All right. I want you to remember, Clark, in all the years to come, in your most private moments, I want you to remember my hand at your throat. I want you to remember the one who beat you. Fade to the screen where we see the signature Frank Miller Batman logo overlaid with a Superman logo. If you're a comic book fan as I am, then you almost assuredly understand the significance of this moment at the 2013 San Diego Comic-Con. I still remember the chills I felt hearing Harry Lennox read this line from the climax of The Dark Knight Returns, one of the most famous graphic novels of all time, and in my opinion, the penultimate Batman story. This was DC's way of letting us know we'd be receiving a Batman vs. Superman movie in the not-so-distant future. This was fresh off the heels of Man of Steel and at the beginning of their cinematic universe. It was a bold move coming out of the gate, so strong, and a comic book nerd's dream to finally see a comic book accurate version of Batman that was able to go toe-to-toe with gods like Supes. Cue almost 3 years of advertising and teasing the film. Everything looked visually stunning and true to the comic. The bat armor used to fight the Blue Boy Scout is ripped straight from the pages. The movie is released. I'm deployed in the Middle East, and I've been there for about 3 months. I miss my wife and my 2-year-old daughter, who barely remembered my face anymore at the time, and my 5-year-old little girl. At this point in time, the movie is the only thing going for me, and it's something to brighten my spirits. There's a dilapidated building that plays movies that we call a theater at the base. I used my one day off to go see the comic book movie event of a lifetime. At least that's what I thought. The movie was shit. Some may argue against this, but they're just plain wrong. The movie's a beautiful train wreck, and that was it. Nice to look at, but no substance. Why do I tell this story? It's to illustrate a point. Almost nothing ever lives up to the hype. Yes, this movie's bad, but had there not been as much hype surrounding it, then one could easily say this is a decent movie. The hype brought it down. When you expect a masterpiece and you get average, it makes it seem terrible due to your expectations. Quality is sometimes determined by previous assumptions. Now to the topic at hand, monopoly and violence. When I first heard Peter Quinones mention this project, I was excited. The topic of anarchy is one seldom discussed, and when it is, it's almost always with malicious intent towards the concept. Part of me was genuinely worried for Pete as well. He's an awesome podcaster, but I knew nothing of his filmmaking skills or the team he had surrounded himself with. Additionally, while this is bewildering to the layman, anarchy is an immensely broad subject to cover. The idea was awesome and the hype was real, but could he and the team stick the landing? Holy shit, they definitely did. Right from the start, this documentary pulls no punches and just showers the audience with red pills. Normies beware. If you use this as a tool to educate your friends or family on liberty, then be prepared for discussion. This is essentially immersion therapy in regards to liberty education. It may be fruitful or may piss off your liberal aunt or conservative uncle, but it will definitely make them think. For those initiating the true beauty of freedom, this is pure bliss and sure to teach you something new. I've been in this scene for a while, and even I learned some new things and was introduced to some new interesting personalities. All right, Patrick, I know that was lengthy, but you have any takeaways from that bit?
Yeah, well, I'm remembering when all this kind of happened when the documentary was first announced. And I think the exciting concept about it is that when Pete teased it, he teased that they were in discussions with Netflix to get the documentary on Netflix. And, unfortunately, that never came together. However, the accomplishment of it is still there. I mean, it's on Amazon, so it's available to tons and tons of people. I guess, whether you have an Amazon Prime account or not, you can still buy it on Amazon. So it's definitely it's out there for lots and lots of people to watch. You could also say that Alex Jones's documentaries are on Amazon too. But it's great. You know, it starts out with a bunch of red pills, and it keeps going from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't remember the Netflix thing, but it's still on YouTube, right? I believe.
I think it is.
Yeah. So I mean, with that, I mean, if you're watching this, remember it's still on their YouTube, so you can still share it around. It's still a great resource. Which I don't know if that's well, I guess we'll go back a little bit. What do you think? Did it like? Did you get that vibe? Because I remember there was kind of that long period of time where it was kind of building up, and I was excited about it. Did you get that feeling of like that, like anticipation of like, oh shit, we got this hype for this thing? Like, I just know that's like common thing with like movies and such. When you have like this big hype, and you're like kind of worried, like I don't know. Like the more hype there is around something, the more you're kind of like, fuck, this probably isn't going to be what I think it's going to be, you know? So I don't know if you got that vibe as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was great branding and great marketing, I think, because they came out with something that's, I mean, they know their audience because they're autistic libertarians like us, you know, and they knew the right places to tease it, and they knew they could like tap into that hope that we have, you know, that hope that we'd be able to get something. I mean, and again, the Netflix thing didn't come together, but it was in a way it was a little too good to be true. You're wondering, you know, because Netflix is such a big controlled platform, but what it was in execution was what they had promised. I mean, we got a whole shitload of the best libertarians, and we put them in a documentary, and we laid out red pills, and it's too bad that the Netflix thing didn't come together, because I don't know how much I would pay to sit a bunch of normies down in a chair and have them listen to Tom Woods and Jeff Deist. You know?
Yeah, no, you kind of brought up a good point. Like, what the last thing is at the end? Like, what are your thoughts on this? On like as a tool for teaching liberty, because it is kind of like a harsh red pill. It's I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like like I said, it was immersion therapy. I think is what I used. So it is kind of, I don't know how great it is, or I don't know. I guess it's like with anything, you got to use a little tact. But there is something to that where it's like it's not bashful about what it is.
Right. And I think one of the most useful things that it might be, sorry, my parents' cats are banging on the freaking door here. I don't know if you can hear that. One of the most useful things, I think the demographic it would hit the most is, I was thinking kids like college kids in the dorm room smoking weed, coming across documentaries to watch on Amazon, you know. I think it would take a certain type of person that is kind of open to the possibility. Like, I don't know about you, when I was in college experimenting with things, I was drawn to things that would be kind of like a mind fuck. And so, I mean, that's, to be frank, it's part of the reason why I became a libertarian in the first place.
Yeah, it's like you're looking for like new edgy things. You're trying to be like an edgelord, or I don't know. I mean, I got it a little bit later when I was like my early 20s, but yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. I get the vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, things like, you know, when you get high and stuff and you watch like nature documentaries, the mundane things you take for granted is like, whoa, it's so cool, you know. And I mean, it's not that nature documentaries aren't cool. It's just that it gives you a real different perspective and a real appreciation of what it is.
Yeah.
And so to reinvent the entire way that you see the world around you, I mean, it's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, no, I can imagine though, just like being a stone college kid watching this. Yeah, because you do get that like stone thing and it like just hits you hard. But like, yeah, this one would probably really fuck with me. And then you add to it the fact that this kind of came out like during the COVID. I don't remember exactly when it came out, but in relation to the COVID, I don't know if it was like the beginning of it or like right before. I think it was around that time it dropped. But yeah, it was kind of like that. I don't know if have you ever watched V for Vendetta?
Yeah.
Did you watch it again during like height of the COVID?
I might have watched the beginning during the height.
That is fucking freaky. Yeah. I remember watching it at that time, and I was like, ah!
Wait,
I'd already seen before and read the book.
Well, isn't there a part in it where, like before the movie starts, there's a plague?
Well, that's the whole backdrop of the movie in a sense. I mean, the plague is an essential part of it, but the idea in the movie is that like this is the fallout because essentially the government orchestrated this fucking fake plague. and then they took power in the meantime. And the funny thing is this is set in England, and then over in fucking America, what's going on? They don't really focus on it much. It's kind of like you kind of got to pay attention to see them say it. But it's like apparently America has gone to like anarchy, and not the kind of anarchy we like. Like it's just like gone to shit.
Yeah.
Like just like I don't know. I guess kind of almost a borderline boog type thing. Like if you will, like just nuts. Like what people think of when they think of like the normies think of when they think of anarchy. Like that's what's going on. And then but in the UK just use that as a window to stamp down on authoritarian wise. And then now they're like basically in lockdowns all the time. That's the creepiest part of that movie is for one that and the fact that it's basically just like everything's a lockdown.
Right.
Yeah, so like I don't know, it just kind of made me think of it. It's kind of the same thing that I can't imagine if I'd been a stoned college kid at the height of the COVID watching this, be like, oh my god, like your eyes opening all at once, like that movie with Sandra Bullock with the one guy that's like holding the lady's eyes open. You know what I'm talking about? The one where God, I wish I remember the name of it. It's like they had to.
Oh right, the Bird Box, right?
Yeah, the Bird Box movie. Yeah.
So, well, the other thing I wanted to mention before we really dive into it, the substance of it was what is the name? You know, Monopoly on Violence. It's a wonderful name, but I think it's. Keith and I had Pete Quinones on our podcast I think a year or two ago to talk about like our red pill books, and of course we all picked Anatomy of the State, and that's because it was my red pill, but I think it was also. Mance or Pete's red pill, and
Anatomy of the State was mine too.
Was it too? Okay, so it's like
well, that's my minarchist to anarchist, if that's what you're saying, red pill. So
yeah.
It really depends on what you're calling red pill. Yeah, that's what put me over the line. But yeah.
Well, in the main thing being is that and this is the red pill of the film Monopoly on Violence. The main thing being is that normies do not see the state for what it is. They don't realize that the state is a monopoly on violence. And most people, they don't want to believe that. For some reason, there's this block in their mind stopping them from realizing that point. But you try and convince people of it like it's some kind of harebrained conspiracy. But no, I mean, this is the mainstream theory of what the modern state is. Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan was one of the first to say this. And Barack Obama said it in an interview with Military Times in like 2009. So, I mean, it's Hobbes. I can't think of, there's a few more people that had said it. But it's a mainstream, well accepted. I mean, legal publications talk about this.
Yeah, no, they did a really good job with the title. That was like perfect, punchy, like exactly what it should be. It was a perfect little like punchy title. I do want to mention real quick, just because I was really proud of my titling when I made the article. I titled the article "The Monopoly on Anarchist Documentaries" because it's the only one, really. I mean, not the only one. I'm sure there are other ones out there, but it might as well be. For all intents and purposes, it's pretty much the only anarchist documentary that I really know of. I don't know if you know any other ones.
I will say there was one from the 90s that was produced by the Mises Institute. So it was about like a history of the Federal Reserve or something. You can find it. I think Joe Salerno was on it. But I mean, it's you're right. It is the only documentary made by like Austro-libertarians that I know of. You could say that James Corbett came out with some documentaries kind of like in that same vein, but James, I don't believe that he didn't go around and interview specifically people for the film to put it together, especially not like sit down interview with Tom Woods and Jeff Deist and Dave Smith and, so. Yeah.
No, was that one you were talking about, the Mises Institute? Was it a was it like on anarchy? Because like this one is, like, or because you said it was about the Federal Reserve, or was it just like, okay, I didn't know if it was like specifically on like the economic side of things, or even just like right.
It's been a long ass time since I watched it, but I swear to God, it's like of the VHS tape vintage. So
okay, I'll have to. That's the big thing with this is they cover everything. Like they do. I mean, probably can do it in the later episode, but there was a little bit of like maybe like left anarchists that didn't get covered as much. But that's more the fault of that some of the left anarchist types wouldn't go with them. But like, they had a hard time getting them on camera.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah.
For the sake of intellectual honesty, I mean, they wanted to get people on. They
Yeah,
wanted to present those sides of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is no issue. I didn't think they fucked up anyway. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't behind the scenes, but it seems like they genuinely intended to do a fair job. I really feel like if they'd had more of that would have been awesome to get more of that, because it is very interesting, and the left anarchist or whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of, especially like history wise, which they go into it, but there was definitely more that could have been covered. But yeah, let's go ahead and move forward with the article. Okay, this one. After the intro, the film starts out with what I perceived as a white pill from the historian James Scott. He puts into perspective how short the state has been around in relation to Homo sapiens, and thus reminds us that coercive entities are not essential to human society. We've talked about that in a previous episode. That was in our 2021. That was the guy I was talking about that he had the book The Against the Grain, where he was like went into how the first states were formed. I don't know if you've ever got a chance to look into that more.
In talking about it now, I remember watching the Monopoly on Violence and then trying to make a mental note, like, I need to read that because, in reading Rothbard, I just remember him talking about the first states being formed, that one tribe would conquer another tribe, but then they found out that it would, they could just enslave people, and that's how the first states were formed.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like James Scott went into his book a lot about how, and like I said, he went over it briefly in this, about how, basically the state hasn't really been around that long in relation to human history. And then also how the first ones were formed in relation to, the advent of agriculture. And, once that came, then it started leeching off the people that were doing agriculture, and they got focused in those areas. So they ended up with people on the outskirts and the hilltops or wherever the fuck, the places that weren't as fertile for agriculture, that were then living on the outskirts, who were essentially the anarchists of the time, if you will. And they, which we've talked about that before. And I have a sort of kind of theory with all that and how that ties into things going forward. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything else on that.
No, except for the fact that I found that documentary from the Mises Institute.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it has a very young Ron Paul, Lou Rockwell, and Joseph Salerno on it. So I dropped that in the chat for you. It's called Money, Banking, in the Federal Reserve.
Oh, okay. That's what I was getting at. It's a little more economic. So it's probably like it's the bottom right political compass or whatever the fuck. That's probably what. Whereas this is like the whole bottom. I mean, it's still a little bit more lean to the right. But
yeah.
Which is they tried not to, but it is what it is. They couldn't get more of them. All right, this next one's going to be more up your alley. Next, we move to the topic of law. Enter Stephen Kinsella, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and Jeff Dice. Good God. Right from the beginning, they clearly signaled they aren't playing around with the quality of their guests. Yeah. Well, there.
the other red pill, is not only is the state a monopoly on violence, but most people, they don't connect. They don't know what law is either. They don't know what the state is, and they don't know what law is. And law essentially is institutionalized violence. It's the enforcement of law is basically institutionalized violence. And I mean, you could say that justified violence isn't violence, it's force. Some people have said that, but essentially what it is in order to enforce your rights, you have to wield the power of force. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called enforcement.
Yeah. Now we move to education with Thaddeus Russell. His part was excellent. Russell was absolutely on fire for every interview clip throughout the film. He touches on the origin of education and how it was intended to create perfect citizens for the state, and how schools are essentially prison for your children. So that one hit hard for me, which admittedly my kids are still in public school, which I hate, but it is what it is. We work with what we got. I still try to red pill them as much as I can. When they put on their stupid mask, they say, "Take that shit off, you fucking nerd."
Well, and I don't know about you, but I think that in their heart, a lot of kids know that it's prison. There's one of the saddest jokes ever is how kids and parents joke about how much school sucks. I don't know if parents somehow hate or say that, but it's always a joke that, oh, kids hate school so much, they just can't wait for the summer. That's actually pretty fucking sad, man. I mean, like, have you ever stopped to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I see it a lot with my kids. It's weird because I actually had the opposite. At least when I remember high school, because I actually did. I was the kid who genuinely like just had a really easy time. I was just like which kind of fucked me over later in life because I had no work ethic intellectually, which I've developed as an older individual. But I was someone who was just like intellectual pursuits came natural to me. I really was a kid who could sleep in class and then take the test and ace it. And like I never really had to work hard. Like if something was too hard assignment wise, I just wouldn't do it because I was going to make up for it with quizzes and tests. And then I also did a lot of sports, so like the principal and teachers always like kind of looked at me, like a scholar athlete type thing. So no one ever really fucked with me. So I kind of had an easy time, but I can understand logically and also seeing with my kids because my kids aren't the same as me. They're very smart, but they're also in elementary school. And so like they're younger, and I kind of vaguely remember elementary school and like being not liking it as much. So because I actually like had a little bit of like a learning disability, I had ADD, and I didn't learn to cope with it until later, which is weird. I feel like the way I think ADD wise ended up being a benefit later. It's kind of just thought differently than others. But as a young person, it took a while to adapt to that, and I had a lot of issues there, and it kind of made my life a living hell at the time. But yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling here. But yeah, I can understand logically why the state is fucking like why the education is fucking bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I had kind of a similar experience. I mean, I was kind of the same as you growing up. For me, I think I was just bored and I thought it was a waste of my time. And so I would get in trouble, because I didn't, especially senior year, I just didn't give a shit at all. And I mean, I had good grades and everything, but so part of the thing too, and I'm sure what they talk about, well, I know what they talk about in the Monopoly on Violence is the role in brainwashing, state education. It's kind of come full circle now. It wasn't always this way, but the way that the state controls the populace, that convincing the populace either that the state is legitimate because God ordained it, or because we are the government. It kind of went from, God and all these mystical powers imbued the leader of the state with the power to rule over everyone else. Well, that stopped kind of working a little bit, so they had to switch it to the state is us with democracy. But the role in brainwashing the masses is so important, whether it's through religious institutions, or whether it's the religious institutions of public schooling.
Yeah, I was listening to today. It's kind of made me think of. I was listening to the episode on Dave Smith's podcast, Part of the Problem. He had Liberty Lockdown on. They were kind of talking about how like essentially what pussies young men are these days, and I think that's a direct result of for one of the lockdowns and the education and how they've kind of just been called into being just bitches. Like he was kind of going into like how like I know like I think he said the virginity rate's gone to the roof, and I saw some stat about that recently for like young males. Which I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some argument that like okay, you probably shouldn't till you get married or a certain age or whatever, but I do think there are things you can infer from that. Like if young men aren't running around getting pussy, like I doubt it's because they're all of a sudden decide to develop a religion and be like, we're gonna. No, it's because they're all fat asses like sitting on the couch and just like I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much you can tie that to fucking education. I mean, I guess you can to some extent, but I don't know. It just was something that got my mind thinking of just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, I just can't imagine. Like, it's like we were getting into how our school was, or like I was just doing drugs, fucking bitches, and acing and playing sports and stuff like in high school. That was my time, but now that's not the case, which in some senses it's probably good, but at the same time it's kind of like that's what being a young man in some regards kind of is.
Well, to tie it into the way that the feminization of men, I think it's because, I mean, have you ever heard any like developmental or child psychologist or even Jordan Peterson talk about how there's a reason why young girls are good at public schooling? Like they're well behaved in class, they are orderly, they do those things. But there's another reason why young boys have such a hard time is because boys are different. Imagine that. Boys are different. and you're forcing them to do a non-masculine activity by having them sit down. I mean, boys are hands-on. They need to compete with each other. They need to be physical. They need to do those things. But when you are forcing them and conditioning them into these classes where they're with girls and being forced to learn the way that girls are, you change them. And you get behavioral problems because that's not the way that they operate, you know?
Yeah, I think I've also heard too. I was just thinking when you said it. There's 2 points I got from that I was just thinking about. But I also heard something before that men tend to be intellectually better specialists, whereas women tend to be better jacks of all trades. So I think that would totally play into how we learn. So like, you know, you're bouncing around. Like I know me, I have a very thin, not thin, I mean, kind of, but there's a narrow pathway of things that I'm very interested in intellectually. But whereas I think women, like my wife is very much like a normie, and not in like a bad way, and like she's the one who fucking knows real world information. She's the one who knows like how the fuck to file taxes and shit like that. Like, she's like the real world grounded person, whereas I'm like the intellectual, like, you know, way more specialized. And also I kind of was thinking about that. I mean, obviously I don't think it's intentional, but there's something to, I think it's kind of derived out of a conversation I was having the other day, the power of the pussy. I don't know, someone off of, she's a Mises chick. There was some comment I left, and she was talking about like how she's going to use simping for good, which anyone who doesn't know simping is, that's like where you kind of use guys' lust to like make shit happen. And I was kind of like, you know, weaponizing the pussy kind of thing. And there's something too, like that this is something for women, and it's kind of like dragging the men along. And it's like, so there is something to, like, I don't think it was intentional, but they're kind of using the power of the women to drive the men a certain way, you know?
Well, this is kind of basic biology. I mean, if you remember back to high school biology, it's evolution. It's like men compete for women's attention, or the women make the men compete for their attention, and then the women are the ones who select the traits that they prefer the most. Another thing about, you know, the way that boys and girls mature, you know, they grow up, is that girls mature faster than men do. And I see it with my son, is that other little girls that are, my son's 2 years old, but other little girls that are his age, they can talk more than my son can. You know, my son can talk, but he's not saying 2 or 3 word sentences, you know. But on the other hand, my son is much more spatially aware. He's really good with his hands, where he can, like, he sorts the blocks into the shapes and stuff. But more than that, he can wrestle, and he can run around, and he's good on his feet, you know. So he has that, you know, kinesiology, the kinetic awareness that girls don't have. So I mean, I guess it kind of goes to like, well, what are men for? They're for building shit. They're for protecting shit.
Yes.
And women are good at nurturing and communicating.
Yeah, we're basically for fucking and killing. That's what we're for.
Right.
Like, this is the basic. I mean, not to be crude. I mean, I guess I don't care. That's kind of my brand. But like, that's basically what men are in a nutshell. You know.
I mean, generally speaking, of course, we're individualists here. A disclaimer, you know, but yeah.
Generally speaking, of course. But yeah, it did kind of make me think that it's like they create this perfect environment for women, and then that's kind of a good way to keep the men in line, because, you know, you create a perfect environment for women, you know, let them to find it agreeable, and it's like, while it may not be agreeable for us, we're young, dumb, and full of cum, and it'll just kind of make us fucking string along, you know, for the ride. So, you know.
And not only that, but do you remember at what point in history was it that women predominantly became school teachers?
Oh, I don't know.
So I mean, you're putting men in a very feminized space.
Mm-hmm. But the point I was getting at, like, I feel like if you run an experiment in your head and you flip it the other way around, and you create an environment that was perfect for men's education, you string the women along, I don't feel like that would exist for long. You know, I just don't think, like, I feel like women would kind of, you know, in a way, kind of derail it. And I don't mean that in like a sexist way. I mean that in just a, you know, like, women don't have that same drive to, you know, be strung along by men in that way, you know?
Well, I maybe there is something to segregating boys and girls, like boys' schools and girls' schools, as long as you have, you know, like healthy interaction between the two.
Mm-hmm.
or having portions of the day where you do that. But I'll tell you where that's not going to happen is with state education, because going back to the monopoly on violence, it's the monopoly. You get one size fits all solutions.
Yeah, I don't know. I just really feel like we would need a whole overall. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. We talked about this in a recent episode of like, I think we were talking about like cultural things. And it's like in the presence of a state, it's hard to tell how things would be, because we were talking about like how culture would be without the state, and it's kind of like we're just guessing. The same thing goes for schooling. Like, I mean, I know during the height of the COVID, when my kids were home, like I felt like they learned a lot. I was with them all the time. You know, we were doing things together. They were naturally learning different things from just being around their parents. Like, I do think that, I know people have this idea that, like, oh, if they weren't at school, they would just, like, not learn things. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the majority of the things I've learned in my life, I did it because I was interested and I learned it myself. So, you know, I don't know. I feel like there's something there. And then I pass that shit on to my kids. So, I don't know.
Kids love to learn. And I think the worst thing about public education is that it destroys that part of a kid. It takes their natural inherent curiosity and crushes it. It doesn't do that for all kids, you know, but it does it for a lot of kids. I mean, especially kids like you and me, I'm assuming, but perfect example. All through high school, I hated reading the books they made us read in English class. I hated it. Later in life, I ended up majoring in English literature, and I happened upon the books that we were assigned in high school because I picked them up on my own, and I love them. Like, they're some of my favorite books, like Fahrenheit 451, or, you know, that's Ray Bradbury. Yep. But I'm thinking of other Ray Bradbury books too. I mean,
it's a Ray Bradbury book I've read, but yeah, go on.
The Giver. The Giver is Lois Lowry, but that was a great book. Or, you know, there was this short story of The Monkey's Paw, which they made us read in high school that I didn't think was very cool, but it's incredible.
Yeah.
So and when someone's telling me to do something, I mean, imagine this. I'm a libertarian. When someone is telling me to do something, I say, fuck you.
No way. Perfect example for me is history. I fucking hated history in school. I mean, I did fine at it, but to me, like, my impression of history in high school, or just school in general, was memorizing dates and facts and names. And that was it. Like, it was super dry and boring, and it was just like, I mean, maybe a part of me felt like it was spoon-fed propaganda, because it just kind of always felt like bullshit to some extent. Like they were teaching some moral along the way. But, I mean, as I've gone older, like, history is kind of one of the fucking coolest things. Like, some of the times, I'm still not a huge history buff, but I feel like I missed out on a lot, especially as a libertarian who's really interested in this space. So much of the stuff ties into history stuff. And then it's still like, I just feel like there's a giant gap in my knowledge, because there was something I just never really was into, because the state education ruined it for me in a sense. You know, at least at the time. Yeah, just, I don't know. Yeah. Which I think literature as well.
It gets dangerous too, because I think what you have to do to be a compelling history teacher is to be able to tell a story. And that's dangerous because telling a story implies that it's not exactly what happened. You're weaving a narrative through it, but that's how people think. I mean, people think in stories. As a trial lawyer, it's like one of the main lessons of it is, okay, well, it's not usually the attorney who tells the most compelling and interesting story is the one who wins the case, who wins the trial. And Prof. CJ is so good at this. I don't know if you listen to the Dangerous History podcast at all.
I haven't listened to him. I've seen him on Lucy Goose, but I haven't listened to him, his podcast specifically. I've heard it's good.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, it's real good.
Yeah. All right, let's move along. Actually, I want to touch on real quick, because I don't think we made an emphasis on it, that one of the points I brought up in the article was just like the cast, if you will. I don't know if the cast is the proper term, but the fucking hitters that come in this is just insane. Like, I have to say hats off to these guys for just the people they got involved. Like, this was quite the endeavor. When I knew they were going to make it, I just kind of thought maybe like a ragtag group, but no, they made a fucking big deal to get the guys. Like, if you're like in the liberty space, especially if you haven't seen this yet, like anyone you're thinking of that's like the guy, it's probably in here, you know? So, I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, if you're going to do it, then do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's just kind of impressive. They got them all, like, and made it happen, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, and I mean all, like, anybody you could think of, like Daddy Ronnie, like Ron Paul, like, he was in there. Like, there was so many people. I'm like, what? They got him? Like, or you know, just, yeah. All right, next one, taxation. Us anarchists generally aren't fans of this. For this topic, we received Donnie Gebert, who reminds us that politicians who beget no negative incentive for squandering your money are very likely to do just that. Dice tells us how taxes are a tool of compliance and how they are actually unnecessary due to the Federal Reserve. Dice is always a treat to listen to. I love him being in this documentary. That was just a little note. I always love fucking Dice. I mean, he can talk about anything. I'm just like, fucking, he has a different angle, and it's fucking fascinating. I don't know what it is about him. He just, I don't know.
Well, he's so articulate.
Yeah.
Right?
But he always has like a slightly unique, I mean, not something that's like way outside, you know, but like just a slightly unique way of looking at things. Like there's been a lot of little things. They're always like subtle things. So it's never like he's like completely made me do a 180 on anything, but it'll always like maybe make me do like a 45. I'm like, huh, like, okay. Like it's a different way to look at it. Like on a lot of things.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely a free thinker. It's like he's not just falling in line, you know? So, but yeah. Anything stand out for you in this one? This is mostly about taxation. We could probably rail about this for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. It just, the implication being that okay, perfect example. In this town that I'm moving to, it's where I went to high school. There's a referendum going on right now, and the vote is on like April 6th. And the referendum is on putting like a huge new addition on the high school. And enrollments are down. We just spent almost an entire year where kids could not be in the high school. What they want to do is they just installed AstroTurf on the football field. Okay. Our graduating class is 160 students. They put AstroTurf on the football field. There's a new theater like going in. They're revamping the theater and moving it to a different place. They're putting a new library in. It's all this shit that is not necessary. I mean, especially
inject capital into a failing business. I'm sure any rational entrepreneur would do that.
yes, exactly. I mean, but moreover, you drive around and you see these signs and they say like, we support our kids, we support our youth, and it's like vote yes. And I'm like, you're making it seem like this is some kind of a charitable donation thing.
Like
it's like, no,
fuck the kids if you don't vote the way we want you to.
Right. But moreover, they're framing it like it's like they're doing something charitable, like they're doing something altruistic. And it's like, no, you are you're forcing everyone else in this town, whether they have kids or not, to invest in a business venture. If Walmart went around saying, like, we're going to force everyone to invest in Walmart because, well, don't you care about getting nutrition to people? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny too, because it's like the first part Donnie brought up is how, like, if the politicians get no negative incentive for squandering your money, and because of that, they're going to continue to do it. Like, this is just rational. Like, that's like one of the biggest things. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't realize, like, one of the biggest things that led me to this, obviously, was we talked about earlier, was fucking anatomy of the state, but it's fucking but incentives, like learning how incentives work, is just kind of like what really made me be like, oh, this is going to likely drive things this way. And like, yes, you can be like, well, if we vote this guy in, then he'll probably do that. But if you look at things over a broad, history or whatever, like, sure, if we get this one guy in, he might vote this way. But overall, the incentives are pushing this way. So it's gonna, over the long arc, go that way. You might get distracted by this one guy here and there. But overall, we're going to keep spending more and more money. You might get one guy in there, like a Ron Paul type, who tries to either slow it or stop it or push it back the other way momentarily. But later, someone else is going to come in and push it that way. So at the end of the day, this is a beast we got to fucking kill.
Yeah, and you made a great point. It's the incentive problem is, let's inject more capital into a failing business. I mean, that's the state is the only system where bad results somehow equal more expenditure.
Mm-hmm. And it turns everybody into smooth brains, because it's like, or binary thinkers, where like, oh, well, if we don't inject money into the school, then, what are the kids going to do? It's not just zeros and ones. Like, I don't know, a million other things could happen. I don't know, like, you could fucking homeschool. They could go to this other school in this other area, a myriad of fucking things. But it reduces us to our, like, basest, like, fucking thought structure. Like, where it's like, nope, 0 and 1. Is it left or right? Is it, up or down? Like, there's more to it than that. I mean, people just, then, I don't know, because at the end of the day, it's a fucking vote that's yes or no. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And I got accused of being a binary thinker on Twitter the other day. I'm still salty about it.
Were you though?
Maybe. I said, well, with this is off topic, but with this whole Tim Pool thing, I said either he's like an unprincipled piece of shit or he's like in bed with the CIA.
Right, and I say that kind of fair to call you binary there.
Well, I said, look at the evidence here. I mean, it's like, okay, he's done zero fact checking. He doesn't get into the other side. Either he's incompetently ignorant that he can't do a fact check or look at the other counter arguments, or he's aware of them and he's ignoring them because he's a shill.
Okay, well that's a better way to put it. When you say he's an unprincipled piece of shit, like I feel like that's because I think I would definitely, I don't know all the situation, but I would probably chalk that up to just be, just, I don't know, not bias, that's not the word I'm looking for. He just kind of fell into a thought process without overly being critical of it. So that's a little different than an unprincipled piece of shit. Like, it's in the right vein, but it's not exactly right.
I said unprincipled piece of garbage, so I was being inflammatory, but not overly so.
Intentionally hyperbolic. I get your point.
Yeah. Well, he was like, I'm generally anti-war, but China is going to enslave the world and put us into an authoritarian. I'm not being hyperbolic. This is what he said.
That is actually, that's kind of fair then. I mean, I don't know, because that is the big failing of the statism is like, it's the whole, I'm a fan of the Second Amendment, but, or,
right.
like, it's always the but. Like, no, then you aren't. Like, which is it? Like, you either are, like, not cool with, like, because, I mean, especially with something like war, it's like, what do you mean? In this situation, it's okay? That's how you just slip right back into it. Like,
it's like fucking for virginity's sake.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, people would say that's pragmatic, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I'm someone who thinks the principled and pragmatic are really the same thing. It's just pragmatic is something people say when they just were like, well, you got to be rational here. And it's like, no, I generally think, like, if you really look at it from a smarter way, generally the principled and pragmatic thing are kind of the same thing.
So interesting.
I don't know. But yeah, because I know people say it's pragmatic, and you're like, well, this is what we got to do. Well, we got to go fight China because of whatever. And it's like, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know. That's whatever. We'll go on the other side there. All right, let's move to the next one. Dice comments on the Fed perfectly transitions us into the next topic of central banking. Here we get Sandy Klein educating us on a scam that is the Federal Reserve. This shifts to Joseph Salerno instructing us why this scam came along in the first place. To further the state's favorite, most profitable for the elite few, and most despicable enterprise, war. So,
hey, so my aside was a great transition into our next topic. Well, I mean, like, as far back as you go, it really started, the phenomenon started with coin clipping, where the monarch would call a reissue of the nation's currency, and what he would do is melt down all the coins and reduce the precious metal content in them, and then reissue them as a diluted coin, and would put a new stamp on it. So I learned about that in Rothbard's book, The Mystery of Banking, which was my favorite.
Yeah, it's very much the war is the health of the state type thing, where it's, that's what drives it going forward. They utilize our fucking animalistic nature and fucking, we got to protect you. And then they use that as a way to enrich certain individuals, and that leads to them making bad decisions, and they have to fix it that way,
I'm trying to think of, like, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Like, does war create central banking, or does central banking create war?
Yeah.
I think it's the first one, is that war creates central banking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would think probably so, because I think there was a period of time. I would think it was probably like there. It's hard to look back. There was probably a period of time where they had some sort of functional money system. I say that, but now I'm thinking back to fucking Rothbard's money, and this has been shit. Like they've been fucking with the money for forever. It was like what. It was like what colonial fucking America was around the first time when they started doing fiat, I think.
Yeah,
so that's when they started being a dick with it. But
I
then
thought,
it was clipping, you know. So,
I thought it was in the 1600s that the Bank of England did. I mean, it's genius. It is a genius scam. Genius in part for its simplicity. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a hard concept to wrap your head around, but if you hide the ball from the populace for so long, because it's boring, because we've been conditioned to believe that this is the most boring subject of all time. Corbett talks about this in his documentary, A Century of Enslavement, A History of the Federal Reserve, came out in 2013. But yeah, I mean, they make it boring. They make it seem boring, but I mean, think about it. It's probably the oldest scam of all time is messing with the currency.
Yeah, and I mean, it is like it has its roots in like something you probably could really. It's pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? It's really, in a sense, its origins probably in a sense weren't that bad. It was genuinely like we're going to institute fiat just because it'll be easier, and there is something to that. But the problem is the institutions who manage it are ones that have bad incentives, and as time goes on, I mean, I'm sure. It's one of those things where it probably never was intentional. I mean, at some point they realized like, hey, this is what we're fucking doing. But, you know, I don't know.
I think
it's the same idea as people join the military with the idea of like, we're going to do the right thing. You know, people do that all the time to this day. But,
right.
You know, and then they realize later like, oh shit, and they're already balls deep. So.
I suspect that it was the people realized they could do fractional reserves in banking. And I think that's when they really realized that, hey, we can get away with this, at least until the chickens come home to roost and everyone runs the bank. But yeah, I mean, moreover, you were talking about war, and the one thing that I wanted to say to Tim Pool, and like he professes to be anti-war, but everyone forgets that, you know, war is not what is Rothbard's quote? I might have to rely on you for this. The war is not the state protecting its citizens from other states. War is the citizens of a state protecting the state. Something like that. You remember that quote?
Yeah, I don't know it offhand, though. I know what you're getting at, though.
I'm going to pull it up.
Yeah. All right, hold on, guys.
We can move on. I'll find it.
Well, move on to be a whole other topic, and I don't really have much to go on there. We were kind of bringing it to a bow there. I don't know if you think you can find it quickly. Oh well, we have a little dead air. Everyone loves that.
No, that's okay.
I'm getting toasty enough to where I don't care. So
I think everyone knows the quote that I'm talking about. Like, at least you should.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably do. All right, let's move on then. Enter guest Jeff Dice, Peter Klein, Daniel McAdams, and Scott Horton. Oh, you thought they blew their wad early with Judge Knapp on the topic of law? How wrong you were. Don't feel bad. So was I when I first watched this. Jeff goes straight for the economics and shows the staggering cost of war. Klein reminds us of the sad affair of the continuous loss of freedom under the precedent of wartime necessity. McAdams highlights the 1984 cycle of never-ending war we put ourselves through by our inane or ingenious, depending on perspective, foreign policy. Scott tugged at my heartstrings once again with his mention of Yemen. That one is personal for me, as that issue is what really opened my eyes to the evil of being in the military. I could no longer claim ignorance to the damage being done by me. No amount of just following orders can justify what Travisy and I also want you to take a moment to drop a harsh reality to any federal veterans out there. What you did was wrong. You contribute to a system that wrongfully disposed of human beings as if they were cattle at an alarming rate. Once you come to terms with that, it'll get easier, and we need to stop sugarcoating this idea. The Nuremberg defense didn't work for the Nazis, so why the hell would it work for you? I took a moment to get a jab at the end there. I was feeling awfully fucking raging out when I wrote that. Yeah.
You know, it's hard too, because when I really started getting anti-war, I felt like I couldn't say anything to veterans specifically because I wasn't a veteran. You know,
it's in some ways it's almost worse when you are a veteran because you're like, it's like you're trying to explain to people how like, hey, we're fucking killing people, dude.
Right.
Yeah, especially when you have like something like I had where it's not like we're killing people, but you can draw the line to like where you're at, to where people are being killed. So, I don't know.
Right. And I mean, Kyle Anzalone is really good on this topic. And I wish that I could Kyle's not, he wasn't in the military. I think maybe some of his family members were, but he blames cops a lot more because at least like if you're in the military, at least you got into it mostly with like good intentions of like protecting liberty and protecting the country and things like that. There's no way that you could know before you get in the military what it's really about. But that's like a bunch of virgins talking about sex. You just have no idea.
Yeah, for me, I know it was very much this idea of like, I went to college, I fucked up college, and I joined the military. Like for me, it was like in my head, in my very simplistic young head, it was like, I go the intellectual route, the scholar route, or I go the warrior route. Like and it wasn't in this like, I thought of it in any bad way. I just seriously thought of it as simple as I was going to go protect my tribe. I was going to protect my nation. And I legit like luckily I didn't end up getting a combat role. I actually failed out of like a semi special forces type thing. But fucking like I legit was like, I want to go fucking kill people and like in a kind of fucking in a upstanding type way. In the same way that like if someone came to my house, this may sound terrible to say, I would have absolutely no fucking problem in violently murdering someone that tried to fucking fuck with me or my family. If anything, I could probably borderline say I might get some joy out of it. But now if it's an innocent individual, I would feel horrible about it. It may sound like, I feel like it's like kind of awful to say that I would get joy out of causing violence, but if it's in a righteous manner, I don't know. Maybe it's just the masculine side of me. Like, if anything, it would be like I'm doing my duty. Like, this is like evolutionarily, like, is what I'm destined to do. So it's like, me and Shane Hazel had an episode about this, about how like the culture of the military and how it like perverts, because it perverts a natural instinct of men, of how like we're protectors. Like I was very much like into sports and working out, everything. Like I very much fighting, wrestling. So for me, that was like being a warrior. That was a natural progression. It was like, and the same thing kind of goes with cops. Even then, I kind of recognized I was fucking gay. Being a cop is just fucking lame. Like, it's super easy to figure out. Like, look at this fucking dork like busting me for fucking weed. But like something about joining the military is like I'm gonna go kill people who would kill me, and I'm protecting my nation. There's something in a weird way like valiant about it in a sense if you don't overthink it. But once the veil is lifted, you're like, oh fuck, like I don't know.
Yeah, no, for real. I think there's nothing more natural about it. But as soon as I say that, I think about how libertarians will say that, widespread war on the scale that we've seen it would not exist without the state. So like in one sense, I think the man as a protector warrior is natural, but you're right, that gets perverted because I don't know. I don't know enough about, I guess, the human condition to know, like, in the absence of of a state, right, there would be predatory banditry, right? Some people would be compelled to go out and rape and pillage.
Yeah, well, that's why I was kind of thinking when you said it. I don't think this is a Conkin idea. It's also in other things that like there kind of is no such thing as the absence of the state. It's not going to go away, and this kind of goes into like a Lark and Rose thing where the state is simply the illusion of authority, and there's always going to be small bands of people that think like I can do this, or whatever. So there is always going to be, I mean, even in a quote unquote absence of the state, there would still be, violent entities that you would need to have watchdogs, which would be something akin to cops or military. But it's different when you're defending your group, your tribe, or whatever, and you're preventing violence than going out and looking for it and causing violence, So,
I think this is a Larkin Rose quote, is that in anarchy, yes, there's a possibility that some people might do bad things, but with a state, it's a guarantee that some people will do bad things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading Ethics of Liberty right now. Like, kind of go into like the two ways of production. Like, so in a sense, like the state is the political method of production, which is, you know, in using violence. So yes, if you were able to get rid of the state, then violence would go away in a sense. But at the same time, it's kind of like the same thing. So they're almost one and the same in a sense if you boil it down. So it's like, yes, if we got rid of bad things, there wouldn't be bad things. You're like, duh. Like, yeah. So it is this. At the end of the day, we do need to have things that defend us from that in a quote unquote free society. But right now, those things that we think are what protect us from it are it. So, you know. But yeah. I don't know if you have anything else. Otherwise, we're basically getting near the end.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've gotten through a whole bunch of stuff today, but this is the basics, man, and I think that's what you need, because in a way, you know, we're kind of reliving our own red pills when we first discovered this information through. You always need a refresher, and it reminds you about why you're on the path that you're on in those base truths. Because, you know, admittedly, you and I, we've gone down our niche specializations, but it's a good nostalgia fest to go back to the basics.
Yeah. All right, last paragraph. Speaking of Nuremberg, the next topic covered is democide. We cover how the governments are more of a risk to its citizenry than other nations are. Judging by the last century, you're 6 times more likely to be murdered by your own government than by another. And people think anarchists are the crazy ones. And this really ties in well to our last point of, like, I brought up how, you know, we're going to need to have things that protect us from violence or the state, which are basically one and the same, you know, but we don't see it that way. But at the end of the day, it really, those are it. The things that we are expecting to protect us from it are it. And that it is what kills us more likely than other entities that we're worried about, you know?
It's crazy. I mean, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, this was a good point. I thought it was a perfect spot to wrap up this segment, because yeah, it kind of like brings it back full circle of how, like, this is the whole government is or state is around to as an idea to protect us, but really they are the worst offender. It's like kind of, you know, where you're in a domestic abuse is kind of essentially where it's like you're, you know, I don't know, I guess maybe that's not the best example, but it's kind of like the thing that you think you need or love is the thing that's fucking hurting you the most, you know? So actually it's a perfect fucking example, because it's like it's what you're dependent on too. Like if you're a housewife that's fucking gets beat by your husband, it's kind of very much the same thing. So
yeah. Because I mean, it might be that you would have a much better life outside, but the unknown is scary. Mm. So in order to not take that risk, you stay in with the status quo, because that's known. At least you know what that's going to yield. But I guess the one big argument that brought me from minarchism to anarchism was the oxymoron of, okay, so in order to have a state, like the only role of the state is to protect our liberty. But by definition, the only way to have a state is to take away liberty. It's not a circle that I could square.
Yeah, for me, the big thing was like, I don't remember if it was in this or we were in the before we recorded, but it was Anatomy of the State that did it for me, but it very much in an autistic way broke down on how incentives and like essentially work and how it was just essentially destined to fall apart essentially. So it's like, I mean, a lot of people, especially minarchists, will bring this back to like, well, you know, the whole idea the founders had that you had to keep having revolution. And it's like, well, now you're just stuck in this stupid fucking vicious cycle, and that obviously didn't work out. Now did it? So,
right.
Like, I don't know. I mean, in a sense, you're kind of sort of right, I guess. And that if we had constant revolutions starting over, it would be maybe preferable, but you're just in a shitty loop.
Right.
So, yeah. I don't know. With that, we're kind of at a good spot, I think. You want to go ahead and drop your plugs?
Yeah, man. So you can find me at libertyweekly.net. You can also find me at the Libertarian Institute at libertarianinstitute.org/Patrick. You can find me there alongside Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Kyle Anzalone, and Tommy Salmons, and Pete Quinones. Did I say Pete?
I don't know.
Anyways.
I don't think you did.
No, okay, yes, Pete Quinones, Free Man Beyond the Wall. So really appreciate it. Find me primarily, watch me on Odyssey at odyssey.com. And donate LBC to the channel. It's a cryptocurrency. It's my preferred way of support these days. So thanks for having me on, Jose.
No
good
problem.
to talk.
It's always a fucking treat. And Scotty, if you're watching, I'm always open for a fucking job. I'm just kidding. Sort of, not really, unless you're about it. But for me, No Way Jose YouTube channel. I'm also anywhere audio podcasts are at. I'm also in the Liberty Movement YouTube and BitChute. This won't be going on it because we clearly went political, and the Liberty Movement's channel is specifically for non-political cultural topics that are liberty related. The Liberty Movement's on Facebook and MeWe. You can hit me up at thelibertymovementglobal@gmail.com. Like I said earlier, give me fucking money. Patreon.com/NoWayJose2020 or at endthefed.app with crypto for No Way Jose 2020. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I'm really excited to keep going with this this series we're doing. So I'm looking forward. So keep an eye out for the next one that Patrick will be hopefully hosting. And yeah. With that, deuces.